I'm Ethan Harper, and I never pictured myself saluting my own ruin. It was our 15th anniversary at the Silver Lantern, candles dancing, history crumbling, when Sophie Wells, my wife, said, "I've been cheating for 2 years. I'm leaving you." The words cut like a blade in shadow. My chest tightened, a scream clawed inside, but I smiled, raised my glass, and said, "To your new life." Her eyes faltered when Nathan Cole, her lover, stepped in. My trap sprung. I'd known for months, pieced it from whispers and Kate Russo's photos, her PI grit unearthing their lies. That night, I slid an envelope over, proof to unravel her world. She didn't see it coming, nor the fallout that'd steal her footing. Our kids, Lily and Noah, slipping from her grasp. But the shocks didn't stop there. Secrets still lurk, waiting to surface. I rebuilt from splinters, hands carving a new path, someone new lighting the way. My life broke open, like a tree torn by thunder, yet something grew. That's the twist. Sit down, this story's just beginning. The evening crept up on me with a tightness I couldn't shake. I stood in our Willow Creek home, adjusting my tie in the dim hallway mirror, the kids already asleep upstairs. Lily, 12 and quick-witted, had left her sketchbook open on the kitchen table, a half-drawn bird staring back at me. Noah, 9 and full of energy, was out cold, dreaming of tomorrow's game. I grabbed my keys, locked the door, and drove toward the Silver Lantern, its name a beacon of old promises. 15 years with Sophie Wells deserved something, and that restaurant, with its warm glow spilling onto the street, felt like the right stage. The engine's hum steadied my pulse, but a shadow lingered in my gut, quiet and insistent. I stepped inside, the air thick with rosemary and wine. The chatter of couples, a soft buzz around me. The maitre d' ushered me to a corner table by the fireplace, candles flickering on white linen, their light catching the edge of my glass. I sat, checked my watch, and waited, the leather chair creaking faintly. Sophie was late, her usual habit, but tonight it twisted something in me, a thread pulled too tight. I sipped water, cool against my lips, and watched the flames shift, their dance a fragile distraction from the unease building in my chest. She swept in 15 minutes later, black dress clinging to her, heels sharp against the hardwood. "Traffic," she said, slipping into her seat, her smile tight, barely there. I nodded, let it slide, and we ordered. Her salmon and my steak jotted down by a waiter with a quick nod. Dinner unfolded in scraps, talk of Lily's art, Noah's latest goal, the chill in the air outside. Her replies came short, clipped, her eyes drifting to the window, fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. I cut into my steak, the knife gliding through, and felt a heaviness settle, a storm brewing behind her silence. Something was off, and I braced for it, my fork pausing mid-bite. Dessert landed between us, a shared tiramisu dusted with cocoa, its sweetness mocking the tension. She took one bite, set her fork down, and leaned back, her gaze locking onto mine, steady, unyielding. "Ethan," she said, voice low and firm, "I've been cheating for 2 years. I'm leaving you." The words crashed like a stone into still water, ripples tearing through me. My fork hovered, cream dripping onto the plate, and the room seemed to fade. Laughter from another table swallowed by a dull hum. 2 years. 2 years of her slipping away, late nights at work, hushed calls, all piling up behind my back. Her eyes flickered, a crack in her armor, but she held firm, waiting for me to shatter. I could have roared, could have swept the table clean, let the plates smash against the wall. A fire surged in my chest, raw and jagged, begging to break free. But I set the fork down, the clink soft against the porcelain, and reached for my wine glass, its stem cool in my hand. "To your new life, then," I said, lifting it toward her, my voice calm, almost a whisper. Her lips parted, a sharp breath escaping, and I caught it, the falter in her stare, the defiance buckling under my quiet. She'd banked on chaos, on me crumbling, but this threw her. A script torn apart. Her fingers twitched on the table, a nervous drumbeat she couldn't still. Inside, I was wreckage, betrayal churning like a tide, pulling apart everything I'd trusted. 2 years wasn't a slip. It was a choice, deliberate and cold, staining every memory of Lily's laughter, Noah's small triumphs, our late-night talks. My grip tightened on the glass, knuckles pale, but I kept my face a mask, forged in the moment. "Ethan, say something," she pressed, her tone rising, a thread of panic weaving in. I took a sip, let the wine burn down my throat, and held the silence, letting it stretch between us, taut and heavy. The waiter glided by, refilling our water, his smile blind to the fault line cracking open at our table. The fire popped, sparks flaring briefly, and I leaned back, watching her shift, her poise fraying at the edges. She'd walked in with control, but now it slipped, brick by brick, under the weight of my calm. I didn't know what came next, not fully, but I felt the shift, the power tilting my way. Then the door swung open, a rush of cool air slicing through the warmth, and Sophie froze, her eyes snapping past me. Her hand gripped the table's edge, knuckles whitening, and her breath caught. "Who's that?" she whispered, dread lacing the words, her mask slipping entirely. I didn't turn, not yet, but my pulse quickened, a steady thud in my ears. The room stilled, voices dimming as footsteps closed in. Whatever this was, whoever stepped through that door, I'd set it in motion, a spark I'd struck without her knowing. Her gaze darted to me, wide and searching, but I stayed quiet, my calm a shield against the storm she'd unleashed. This wasn't just a dinner gone sour, it was a reckoning, and I was ready to face it, whatever came next. The silver lantern's air turned heavy as the door clicked shut, footsteps slicing through the restaurant's hum. Sophie's voice trembled. "Who's that?" Her eyes fixed beyond me, fingers digging into the table's edge. I didn't turn, already knowing, my text from hours ago, "Join us, it's time," echoing in my mind. My wine glass sat still, candlelight catching its rim, and I leaned back, letting the silence coil, tight and unyielding. Her breath quickened, shallow, her grip on control slipping away, and then he stepped into the glow, Nathan Cole, sharp suit, easy stride, the ghost who'd haunted my marriage for 2 years. Weeks back, I'd met Kate Russo at the Rusty Diner, its air thick with burnt coffee. She'd pushed a folder across the table, photos spilling out, Sophie and Nathan caught in stolen moments. "You sure?" she'd asked, voice rough, and I'd nodded, silent, the truth settling cold in my chest. I didn't shout, didn't break, just took it and left, the weight a quiet bruise. 2 years they'd carved out, a secret life shadowing Lily's sketches and Noah's games, while I'd patched their lies with trust. Now Nathan stood by our table, his smile faltering under my stare. "Ethan," he said, smooth testing, "didn't see this coming." I pointed to the chair and said, "Sit, you're in it now." He paused, glanced at Sophie, then sat, the leather groaning faintly, her face cracked, eyes darting, lips parting, then shutting tight. "What is this?" she snapped, voice brittle, a trapped edge cutting through. I tilted my head and said, "You want it out, let's make it real." The words struck, soft but sharp, and she flinched, her poise unraveling. Nathan's hands rested on the table, fingers tapping once, then stilling, a flicker of unease breaking his calm. Inside, I was a storm caged in glass, rage and hurt twisting, pressing against the edges. 2 years of her glances, his presence, their betrayal churned, raw and relentless. I could have lunged, shattered that cool mask on Nathan's face, but I held back, Lily and Noah steadying me, their small lives a tether. Sophie searched my eyes and said, "Ethan, this isn't funny." Her tone spiking, desperate. I sipped my wine, let it sting, and said, "I'm not joking." Nathan shifted and said, "Let's keep this quiet, man." But I cut in, "You walked in, it's loud enough." The waiter lingered nearby, tray in hand, eyes flicking toward us, sensing the fracture. The fireplace snapped, a spark flaring, and the room's chatter dulled, swallowed by our corner's weight. Sophie leaned forward and whispered, "You knew?" Dread threaded her words, and I nodded, slow, deliberate. She'd played me for blind, fed me scraps while I slept beside her lies. But I'd felt the chill, seen the seams split. Nathan's jaw clenched, his ears peeling back, and I caught it, the shift in his eyes, a man stepping onto thin ice. "How long?" she pressed, voice trembling now, and I said, "Long enough." I pulled the envelope from my jacket, slid it across the table, the paper whispering against the cloth. "Open it," I said, voice flat. Final. Sophie froze, her breath hitching, and Nathan pushed his chair back an inch, knuckles whitening on the edge. It lay there, small, heavy with ruin, proof beyond their nights together. She stared, unblinking, fear washing away her last scraps of defiance. "Ethan, please," she said, voice splintering. But I stayed still, letting the tension wind tighter. Nathan's gaze snapped to her, then me, and he barked, "What's in there?" His cool, breaking, sharp, and loud. I said, "Everything," and watched it land, a stone sinking deep. The restaurant pulsed, a thin veneer of normalcy cracking around us. Laughter rang from another table, distant, unreal against our silence. Sophie's hands hovered over the envelope, shaking, her mask gone, stripped bare. Nathan's chair scraped again, a faint retreat, and I felt the heat, their world colliding with mine, splintering on impact. Inside, I frayed, love warped into something jagged, but I held firm, my calm a weapon honed in the dark. The fire cast shadows across their faces, and I knew this was only the edge, a crack splitting wider with each breath. Sophie's fingers brushed the envelope, then jerked back, her gasp a quiet wound in the air. "You don't have to do this," she whispered, pleading now, but I didn't answer, my silence her mirror. Nathan's eyes narrowed, his hands balling into fists, caught in a trap he hadn't seen coming. The room stilled, footsteps faded, and I sat, steady, the spark I'd struck burning bright. The envelope rested on the table, a quiet bomb in the silver lantern's glow. Sophie's fingers shook above it, her eyes wide, fear etching lines I'd never seen. Nathan leaned back, fists loosening, his gaze darting between us, hunting for a crack to slip through. I sat still, wine glass cold in my hand, watching her crumble, the woman I'd vowed to crumbling under her own weight. "Ethan, don't," she whispered, voice breaking, but I didn't flinch. She grabbed it then, tearing it open, paper spilling out, emails, receipts, bank logs glaring up in stark ink. Her hands stalled, breath catching, and Nathan's jaw slackened, a hiss escaping through his teeth. "What the hell?" he snapped, voice spiking, the waiter near the fireplace glancing over. I tilted my head and said, "You tell me." It wasn't just an affair. They drained her company, funneled cash through hidden veins, a net Kate had snared for me. Sophie's eyes raced over the words, color leaching from her face, and she choked out, "No, this can't," her plea fading to a rasp. I leaned in, voice steady. "You thought I'd miss the leaks?" She recoiled, my words a stone dropping through her silence, and Nathan shoved his chair back, hesitating, eyes darting, then barked, "This is bullshit." He bolted, feet pounding the floor, the door slamming behind him. I watched him go and said, "Run all you want, it's done." Sophie's hands crushed the papers, her stare locked on the empty space he'd left, and I saw it, the snap of her tether, abandoned in the wreck she'd built. The restaurant buzzed on, laughter and clinking glasses, a distant hum against our ruin. Sophie's shoulders caved, her voice ragged. "Ethan, I didn't mean this." I set my glass down, the sound crisp, and said, 2 years says you did." Her eyes welled, lips trembling, but I felt nothing stir, a well run dry. Inside, I was a tide pulling back, fury cooling to a hard, heavy calm. Lily and Noah my moorings through the storm she'd unleashed. She'd staked everything, and the house had folded. Days later, the collapse came swift, a blade cutting clean. Her boss called that morning, voice sharp through the line, and by noon she was fired, the embezzlement news burning through her office. She rang me frantic. "They know, Ethan, they all know." But I cut the call, her desperation a faint echo I let fade. Friends deserted her, shadows scattering from the light. And by week's end, she stood at my Willow Creek door, eyes sunken, pleading, "Let's fix this." I stepped out, closed the door behind me and said, "You carved this pit, stay in it." Her knees buckled, a sob tearing free, and her tears hit me like dust on stone, stirring nothing. I turned away, the lock clicking, a line drawn cold and final. My chest tightened, not with rage, just weariness. A man watching a ship sink he had once sailed. She'd lost it all, her job, her pride, her footing, the cost of her gamble piling high. Nathan had vanished, a rat in the wind, leaving her caged in the mess she'd spun. Inside, Lily's pencil scratched. Noah's laugh rang out, and I held them close. Their world my shield against her chaos. The days blurred, me moving through motions, school runs, quiet dinners, whispers of her fall reaching me, a colleague's mutter at the store. She's finished. I didn't smirk, didn't revel, just felt the void where faith had lived, a scar hardening slow. One night I sat in the backyard shed, hands brushing wood, its grain a rough comfort under my fingers. Sophie's new life had crumbled, swallowed by the mire she'd sown, and I wondered what else Kate had dug up, what threads still dangled. My phone buzzed then, Kate's name flashing, her text stark. "Found more. Call me." I stared at it, a spark flaring in the stillness, my pulse kicking up. The kids slept inside, the shed's quiet held me, and I exhaled, bracing for the next wave, her deceit's shadow stretching far beyond the ruins I'd seen. Months slip on after the silver lantern, Sophie's pleas a faint echo behind my Willow Creek door. I fell into a rhythm, school runs for Lily and Noah, their chatter over dinner stitching me together. The backyard shed turned refuge, tools sharp in my hands, wood bending under my grip, each cut a step from the wreckage. Lily sketched a chair's curve one night, her pencil a whisper against the quiet, while Noah sanded an edge, grinning, "Smooth, Dad." Their faith tethered me, a lifeline pulling me up, and I held it tight, building something theirs. Whispers of Sophie's fall drifted in, a clerk at the store muttering, "She's with her sister now." Broke. I didn't dig, her ruin a noise I muted, the kids my anchor. Then Ava Bennett walked into the shed one afternoon, boots dusting sawdust, a bag of screws from Bennett's tools and timber in hand. "Thought you'd need these," she said, voice warm, eyes steady. I took them, nodded, and she lingered, tracing a bench I'd finished last week. "You've got a gift," she said, firm, and I shrugged. "Keeps me going." Her smile flickered, soft as pine, and I felt it, a spark catching dry wood. She returned, her visits threading into my days, coffee shared over talk of grain and loss. She spoke of her divorce once, left me with Jack, and the shop made it work. I told her of Sophie, the dinner, the papers, voice steady, raw. "You're still here," she said, and I nodded, barely. Jack, 7, chased Noah around the shed one day, Lily sketching them, laughter ringing out, and Ava watched saying, "Good crew." A crack split open, light seeping in, and I let it grow. Quiet, real. The wood stacked higher, tables, chairs, that bench Ava eyed last week taking shape, my hands tougher with each knot I smoothed. She pushed, "Sell these, Ethan. They're worth it." And I resisted. "Not yet." She grinned. "Yes, now." I sold a table, then 2, the shed alive with purpose, Lily drawing a sign, Harper's Woodworks, Noah nailing it up, for luck. Their pride settled on me, a weight I welcomed, and I saw it, a life rising from ash. Then Sophie called, her voice thin, cracking, a sob cutting through the line. "Ethan, I need you back." I stood in the kitchen, kids upstairs, phone cold against my ear. "That road's burned," I said sharp, and hung up as her cry broke, a jagged edge I didn't catch. Her plea lingered, a chill brushing my neck, and I wondered what she saw, a man she'd lost or a fool she'd shaped. Doubt stung not for her, but the years I'd fed her lies, and I stepped into the shed, hands finding wood, its grain a path forward. Ava rolled up the next day, truck heavy with lumber. "Figured you'd want this." We stacked it, her arm grazing mine, and she said, "You're good at starting over." I paused, setting a plank down. Had to be. She nodded, then grinned and, I entered that bench you made in a fair contest. You won. My breath caught. You did what? She laughed. First prize, Ethan. They loved it. I stared, her eyes bright in the shed's glow, and felt it strike. Pride flaring with something warmer, her trust a flame lighting mine. Lily and Noah whooped it when I told them, their arms around me, and I stood taller, roots breaking through stone. The shed hummed that night, tools strewn, kids asleep inside, and I sat, fingers on the bench, its lines a quiet win. Ava's words sank in, starting over. A truth I own it now. Sophie's call, a ghost fading fast. Kate's text, found more, sat unanswered, and I wondered what lingered in her mess, what shadows still stretched. My phone buzzed then, Kate's name sharp on the screen. Nathan's in deeper offshore accounts, fake IDs. She's linked. I stared, the shed's calm splintering, my pulse thudding loud. Sophie's fall wasn't finished, and I wasn't free, the past clawing back with teeth I'd missed. Kate's text sliced the shed's calm. Nathan's in deeper offshore accounts, fake IDs. She's linked, a spark jolting my Willow Creek night. I dropped the phone, fingers brushing the bench's polish, its gleam steady, but my pulse hammered, a rhythm I couldn't still. Months had carved a new life since the silver lantern. Sophie's ruin fading, mine growing, yet this dragged it back, a claw tearing at the roots I'd set. Lily's sign, Harper's Woodworks, hung proud, Noah's nail jutting out, and I gripped their trust, a shield against the shadow swelling once more. Morning cut through, frost biting the lawn, and I called Kate, her voice gravelly. He's been shifting cash, fake names, offshore pits. Sophie's in it, her name's all over. I braced against the kitchen counter, coffee cooling, and said, "How deep?" She answered, "Deep enough for bars if it holds." I breathed out, slow, the truth a weight sinking fast. Not shock, just burden. Sophie's schemes ran darker than I'd known. Nights I'd slept blind beside her plans. Lily shuffled in, yawning, Noah trailing, and I grinned. Big day, huh? Hiding the storm I felt closing in. The shed pulsed that week, orders rising, a table shipped, a chair sold, my hands steady on the wood. Each cut a claim on this life. Ava rolled up midweek, her truck crunching gravel, and nudged me. That bench still looks like a winner. I smiled thin. Your fault. And she laughed. Yours too. Her warmth anchored me, but a neighbor's mutter at the store lingered. Heard Sophie's asking about the kids. A thread tightening my chest. Then her lawyer's letter hit. Custody demands stark on the page. And rage flared. A fire I'd banked since that dinner. She'd lost it all. And now she reached for Lily and Noah, my last unbroken ground. I called Kate, voice taut. She's suing for them. She shot back. Weak play, Ethan. We've got her. Fraud, the works. I paced the shed. Enough to end it? She said, enough to crush it. And I hung up, air thickening, my calm splitting at the seams. Court loomed swift, a stark room, Sophie across me, gaunt, eyes flickering, her lawyer rigid beside her. I sat, Kate's files in hand, pages of her deceit, her name etched in lies. The judge scanned them, voice even. Mrs. Wells, explain. And she faltered. I didn't, it's not, her defense dust under the proof. My lawyer rose. She's unfit, Your Honor, documented crimes. And Sophie's stare hit me, raw, pleading. But I turned away, Lily's voice, Noah's grin my wall. The gavel dropped, custody mine, her claim gone, and she sank, a wisp dissolving in the glare. I stepped out, cold air sharp, relief seeping slow, a tide sliding off stone. Inside it rang empty, no joy, just quiet, a battle won but weathered. Ava waited by her truck, Jack tossing pebbles, and she asked, You okay? I nodded, yeah, over now. And she smiled, good. We drove to the shed, her hand grazing mine, and unloaded wood, Lily hauling a plank, Noah stacking ends, their laughter a stitch in my cracks. I watched, a knot easing, and felt it turn, a life I'd shaped, not just held. That night Ava lingered, coffee curling steam between us, Jack dozing on my couch, the kids upstairs. She leaned in, "You're free of her." And I said, "Almost." Her fingers laced mine, firm, warm, and I stayed there, a pull I welcomed. The shed glowed outside, orders piling, a beat I'd forged, not found. Kate's text flickered, offshore accounts, a net tightening, and I knew it wasn't done, but tonight it paused, this space mine, theirs. Then my phone flashed, a news alert piercing the hush. Fugitive arrested in Spain, fraud charges piling, local woman tied to scheme. I stared, Nathan's name stark, Sophie's nodded in, and my breath snagged, the past splitting wide, deeper than I'd braced for. A year had spun past the silver lantern, late fall chilling Willow Creek, the shed glowing steady in the dusk. Harper's Woodworks hummed, Lily tracking sales with a fierce grin, Noah hauling scraps, his laugh a spark in the air. Ava's truck rolled in often, Jack tumbling out beside her, their chaos blending with my kids, a weave tightening my days. That dinner's sting had faded, a scar smoothed by the life I'd shaped, roots deep in this ground. Nathan's arrest in Spain broke weeks back, headlines cutting sharp. Fraud fugitive nabbed, local woman tied. Sophie's name nodded in the wreck. I'd scrolled the news, her face thin in a blurry shot, eyes sunk, a ghost of who she'd been. Whispers hit Willow Creek, a clerk muttering, "She's locked up soon." And I nodded, letting it slide. Lily asked once, soft, "Mom okay?" I knelt, "She's finding her way," and they trusted, their world mine to hold. Inside it eased, a burden shedding slow, not glee, just an ending I'd outgrown. Ava mentioned it days back, voice low as we sanded planks. Saw her car near town, looked lost. I'd shrugged, not my road, but it lingered, a thread pulling taut. Then Sophie appeared at my door, frail, hair flat, a cardboard box clutched tight. I stepped out, door clicking shut, and she said, "Brought this old photos stuff." Her voice quaked, brittle, and I took it, edges rough against my palms. "Find your path," I said, even, final, and she nodded, eyes glistening. "I'm trying." A photo slipped as she turned, our family, Lily tiny, Noah a streak, hitting the dirt, a shard of what she'd torched. She paused, then shuffled off, a shape shrinking into the dusk, and I felt it ripple, a lake struck still, her grief a wisp I let drift. The shed thrummed that night, Ava beside me, her tools tangled with mine. Jack sprawled inside with Noah over checkers. She smoothed a board. "She's gone for good now," and I said, "Yeah, gone." Her hand found mine, warm, sure, and I held it, a fit I'd grown into. Lily poked out, "Bigger sign, Dad?" And I laughed, "Soon." Their chatter rang, a beat I'd struck, and I saw it, a family not shattered but forged anew, stronger for the breaks. The past dimmed, Nathan's fall, Sophie's too, a wave receding, leaving space for this. I carved late, from the grain up, letters deep in the wood, a name for the shop, the life. Ava watched, Jack dozing on her arm, and said, "Suits you." I smiled, "Suits us," and hung it by the shed, Lily and Noah rushing out, cheering, their hands steadying mine. The sign shone, a mark of what I'd made, a truth mine. Sophie's box sat in a corner, unopened, her collapse complete. Nathan's too, and I felt no urge to crow, just a nod to their price, the peace I'd claimed. Days flowed, orders surging, the kids blooming, Ava's voice a note in our tune. I stood in the shed one night, tools quiet, air cool, and let it land. The weight of hope, solid but bright, a choice I'd taken. That betrayal had split me, a trunk cracked by lightning, but the roots gripped, stretched, grew. Sophie's echo was gone. Nathan's too, their paths a glass I'd turned from, reflecting only ahead. I locked up, the sign catching moonlight, and walked in, Ava's laugh drifting, the kids' hum a balm, my stride firm on soil I'd sown. A letter came days later, Sophie's scrawl on the envelope, postmarked from a detention center. "I'm sorry," it started. I held it, the paper light in my palm, a last breath from her void, and set it in the box with the photos, unopened, beside that fallen frame of us. I stepped back, the past sealed there, a weight shed for good, and turned to the shed's glow, the life I'd built standing tall. This is my story, Ethan Harper. A journey from shattering betrayal to standing firm on ground I carved myself. The biggest lesson? You can't undo what's lost, but you can choose to rise, to build from ashes, to let go when it's time. Sophie chose wrong, paid with everything, while I chose hope. Lily, Noah, Ava, myself. Life's never gentle, but it taught me resilience isn't revenge. It's living better for me and those who matter. What do you think of this path? Should I have opened her letter or left it sealed like a door I'll never unlock? Does Sophie deserve forgiveness, or has her price been enough? I'd love to hear your thoughts below. You've walked these 6 chapters with me through every storm and spark. Share your take, your feelings. They mean a lot after this ride. I'll see you again in another tale, where we'll explore more shadows and light of the human heart. Thanks for being here with me.